So in the last two videos, in reference to what I'm calling Big Spirit, I really went into how the Big Spirit system functions through the so-called spiritual teachers and the spiritual entertainers. So it's really more of a breakdown of how these teachers and so-called entertainers work with the individual. With this video, I want to go into why instead of how, more of why. What is this system that Big Spirit, Big Pharma, Big Tech, what are they working towards? As I've said in previous videos, the main manipulation tool that was used to control the masses and individuals was the use of fear. Fear of poverty to keep you in the system working, channeling your energy to power the system. Fear of being excluded from the masses. Fear of being attacked by the system. As people are becoming more aware of the system, how the system works, the system needs to evolve itself out of its old ways of manipulating the mind, manipulating the people, from fear into something that's more believable, something that's more complex, something that the masses and individuals can get behind. What was used back in the day was the fear of God. Since the church was in such a relationship with the state, people got behind and pushed and stood by the state, stood by the church because they got their energy from God. So the fear of God was channeled through the system. But now that you have people not even going into having the same relationship or connection with the mainstream God through the mainstream religions, those systems of control are not working anymore. So there has to be a new system of control relating to the idea of God, the idea of spirituality. People are getting more intelligent. They're communicating more. So the system's ways of controlling the masses needs to be more complex. It needs to be more believable through intelligence. This is why you have such a push for the idea of science. You have such a push for the idea of pushing science is really pushing the intelligence of the system. Western intelligence, modern intelligence, evolved monkey Darwinian evolution intelligence. So in trusting science, you're trusting the evolution of humanity, the mainstream version of evolution, the mainstream identity connection that you feel when you have a relationship with technology and education as it's pushed through the public education system and the education systems overall. That relationship that you have with intelligence is founded, it's rooted in the idea of evolving from monkeys through Darwinian evolution. That evolution comes from the Big Bang into the intelligence of the creation of the earth, into the creating of animals, to the creating of monkeys, the evolution of cavemen, into the evolution of humanity, then all the creations from humanity. Mostly technology, up to technology, because technology is the peak. Technology is seen and sold to the masses as what allows you to visualize beyond this experience, going into quantum physics, going into so-called space travel. This modern technology is the evolutionary peak of Western intelligence. This includes the pharmaceutical industry, the medical industry, the vaccines. So going against so-called science, going against the vaccine, people take it personally, both unconsciously and consciously, because you're going against evolution. You're going against the peak of human intelligence. This is why there's such an arrogant response to somebody who claims to be not even necessarily against vaccines, but just not for them, for your own natural beingness. You're seen as some kind of outsider. For people who go into challenging the heliocentric universe, you can see the similarities of bringing up a non-heliocentric universe to people who fully are vested into the globe model, into the heliocentric universe. If you even question that that is the reality. If you even question the moon landings, if you question that Elon Musk put a sports car in the top of a rocket and sent it to Mars, if you question this shit, then you are seen as some kind of kook, some kind of quack. And like I've said in previous videos, you're fit into this category. This is why the whole Trump movement was put out there, was to ball up these conspiracy theorists and QAnon thinkers, to get anybody who thinks outside of the mainstream thought process to be a part of a group that can be demonized, that can be shunned, that can be balled up into this ball of anti everything and pushed to the side. To even think outside of what is accepted in this reality. I had somebody call me argumentative just from bringing up the idea. We weren't even arguing. I just brought up the idea, but that's the response, because you have groups of people. It's so absurd to even think outside of that. They think you're arguing with them because they assume that they're right. So if you bring up a theory or an observation of reality that questions the very nature of their whole foundation, you're arguing. You're creating an argument because you're not accepting what everybody else accepts. You're not accepting the reality. So when you really break down the relationship through these conversations about this intelligence, because it's intelligence that's being sold to the masses now. Trust in so-called intelligence. Trust in science. Trust in space travel. Trust in technology. Trust in the vaccine. Trust in your leaders. Trust in so-called democracy. Trust in the Western so-called civilization. Trust in the process. Trust in the evolution of our experience. But when you really go into what you're vesting your trust into, you can see how this is basically the foundation of egoism. When you're challenging somebody's intelligence that is based upon theory and loose belief systems, mainstream focused belief systems, their response is very similar to somebody who has their egos challenged, a narcissist who has their comfort zones challenged. They will lash out and respond in ways that will attack you personally, will demonize you, will deflect and project onto you, all to distract from the original conversation. This same thing is happening in the so-called spiritual communities, the New Age communities. Ultimately, spirituality as a whole is the peak of egoism. The idea of God, the awakening, the enlightenment, the universe, it's all a projection of ego onto the experience itself. It's a way to project our interpretation of something that we can't explain, so that we can explain it to ourselves, so we can be comfortable with ourselves. Just as language will never be able to explain or define something complex or even simple. All of these different perspectives through spirituality and the New Age community, all this stuff, it will never touch what that so-called isness is. So when you really break it down, it's a more complex form of entertainment. Spirituality is spiritual entertainment. It's a complex form of the ego. God, the idea of God, is a projection of ego onto the life force or the non-physical itself. It's a name that we put on there. It's a way to grab onto, in a sense, something that you will never be able to grab onto. But you'll settle for the illusion of touching what that is with language, with interpretation, with deep breakdowns through your spiritual teachers and gurus and entertainers and so on and so forth. You'll settle for a touch, and that little touch is now upgraded to the definition of what that is. Just as that touch can be seen as what so-called scientists' theories do to your interpretations of these realities. So the theories of the Big Bang Theory, the evolution theory, these are all sold to you as truth. You believe them. And all of these other interpretations of reality are built upon that artificial foundation, which is still a theory. Entire universes, entire worlds are built on top of these theories. And the entertainment follows that. The awakening or enlightenment is a projection of the ego onto the process or the intelligence of that life force energy within that experience. And the universe is the idea of the universe is a projection of the ego onto the experience itself. So you have the life force energy, a projection. You have the process, the experience of interpreting intelligence within that experience of that life force energy, and then the experience itself. All projections, all ways to define and feel a certain way to make us feel comfortable. Nobody wants to feel left out of the loop. Nobody wants to feel, you feel dumb if you start breaking things down. So spirituality itself is just another way for the complex intelligence of so-called humanity to basically not feel spiritually dumb, to polish up and shine that 99% of the interpretation of the experience and call it 100%. So we can feel relevant in the universe. So we can feel on some kind of baseline with the idea of other intelligences outside of this universe or even inside of this universe. And with that base, with that ego projection onto the life force energy, with that ego projection onto the intelligence and onto the experience itself, that foundation, like those foundations of the theories of relativity, the theory of gravity, the theory of evolution theory, the Big Bang theory, like those theories, you can build an entire spiritual universe on top of those projections. And this is what the New Age community is. This is what spirituality is. Take it a step even further into these spiritual con men, like consciously con men, because I've explained in the previous video before last, how spirituality itself is a con. But you have conscious con men who are using spirituality to manipulate and control masses of people, whether it's individuals or hundreds of thousands of people. Because ultimately the idea of spirituality, to get into it a little bit, is mostly about clearing out the access, making things as simple as possible. The more complex you get, the more it's an expression of the ego. The ego needs to be complex because the ego needs to be believable. It needs to complexify everything so it can consume your entire reality, consume the realities of those who are in relationships with you. The complexities so that once it gets control over your experience, it can now control other people. So if you can understand that the idea of spirituality, just to entertain this transition for a moment, because it is a stepping stone, to understand that the spiritual stepping stone is mostly based upon letting go, clearing out, as opposed to holding on to something. Once you start holding on to something, you're getting more heavy. But to add on to that experience, the idea of enlightenment, awakening, these gurus, and spirituality itself, it's making that cleansing of that ego, cleansing of the interpretation of this experience. It's making it more foggy. It's making it more complex. And to turn spirituality into a collective thing is the ultimate fog. To take this idea of spiritual awakening and enlightenment and say that we as a mass of humanity, as if it's that simple, completely cutting out all the other complexities of who and what you are in reference to different patches of people around the world. To say that we all as a people need to do this instead of overcomplicating and drowning everything out through overcomplication, that's a drowning everything out through oversimplification. And this is what the New Age community and so-called spirituality also does. It's a balance of making more complex and oversimplifying. The complexities, the over complexities, linking all back to control. To make something too complex means that you can control what those complexities are through the intelligence, the interpretation of that complexity. This is what the education system does. Your science, your gurus, your mainstream, your controllers, your leaders, they can control that complexity. This is a manipulation tool. On the other hand, you have your gurus and so-called spiritual teachers in another way talking to the masses of people and individuals who are selling you these ideas of oversimplification. Oversimplification ideas like, we need to just unify as one. Let's all come together as love. And do what? Well, just come together in love. Is that it? See, when you get into the nuts and bolts of what that entails, this undoing of so much mind control, this addressing things, very tangible systems. For an example, the psychological and cultural damage of something like the system of racism, white supremacy, what that has done to not only so-called black people, but so-called white people. Just the terminology alone, that's not even being addressed. People are still calling themselves a color. And then those colors, like going into that actually standing for something, those colors, like that illusion of blackness and whiteness being a theory and a foundation that can be built upon, those colors actually hold some value, not only in your consciousness, in the psyche, but value, blackness, in the maritime admiralty system, in these laws that are written. This is another form of control, conscious and subconscious. Another oversimplifying you. Blackness and whiteness is a form of oversimplification for control. Saying something like racism doesn't exist, you're just focusing on racism that's low vibration, that's low energy. It's another form of oversimplification for control. No, what has happened as a result of hundreds and hundreds of years of this mind control? How long is it going to take to heal ourselves individually and beyond? Because of those systems that have been running for years, centuries. That's a form of cleansing out those mind controls. That's a form of so-called spirituality that's not even acknowledged as something. It's downplayed, it's dismissed. Mostly because it's not a part of the people who are dismissing it. It's not a part of their reality. For the most part, they're on the so-called privileged side of it. Whereas before we even walk out the door, the biggest part of so-called racism exists inside the individual. Thinking, having to deal with that psyche in your dreams, even at work, in the economy, in the education system, in the law system, in your healthcare industries, in your own relationships, your psyche, how you visualize family, friends, loved ones, partners. These are all things that are being oversimplified. That process is being oversimplified so that the complex system can take over. It's the balance between the complex and the oversimplification system, which is this new age, new world order. These talking heads like Russell Brand are placed into, whether they are aware of what they're doing or not, their design is to push those fortune cookie phrases, that fortune cookie oversimplified approach to what's going on, as if it's the end all be all, so people can emulate. They want to be like him and think that that's the only way that you should address these programs. And if you address it any kind of other way, you're an outsider. You're not for forward progress. You're not for evolution. You're not for the love and light crew of people who are really in line to make big changes in the world. People like Russell have said in conversations with people who are saying, no, we need to address these systems that have been existing for hundreds of years. We need to undo these mind controls. He's said, in so many words, spirituality is the end all be all. We just need to become spiritual beings and all these other things will fix themselves. No, that's an illusion. It's a fairy tale for a particular purpose. That loose interpretation, that loose approach to what's going on is at the core of the New Age community. Those loose interpretations of this reality are sold to these masses in the New Age community. It's just another version of fear. The New Age community itself is ultimately fear-based in that it attempts to soften the blow of experiences like death and the unknown after death, the death that we experience every day, the death and destruction that's happening within this experience, how to deal with it, how to avoid it, the fear of facing this dark world. Jump into a world of love and light, and you'll be okay. Just as people ran blindly into the vaccine out of the fear projected into the mind of the people, people are going to run blindly into the New Age community out of the fear of the unknown, out of the fear of the old age. People will run into the New Age. And other parts of those groups of people will run there out of the fear of being left out. They're going to run into the fear of missing out, the fear of being an outsider. You already have this happening in New Age communities. People not even knowing what the hell they're talking about. Just regurgitating things that these spiritual teachers and gurus have said, stuff they read in books. You ask them questions and they spout something out to you that they read on a spiritual New Age meme or something. And once you challenge that, once you challenge their belief systems, they have an escape plan. The escape plan is to project onto you, to label you as low energy, or you just don't understand, or because you're whatever it is. There's ways of dealing with people like you who are not on the same team of just people regurgitating and sharing things back and forth that feel good. You're not in the New Age. You haven't cleaned your old age self out. You're part of an old paradigm. You still have all of these old things you're dealing with. The New Age community and spirituality itself is going to be like an ego-mandated vaccine. Just as these vaccines were mandated, the idea of a new age, a new world, is going to be mandated. And you will be excluded if you do not accept this mandate. You'll be sick. You'll be a potential virus carrier, the virus of the old age. You're spiritually unvaccinated. You're a threat to the rest of the people. This is what this bringing down of everybody is. Bring everybody down. Because when you want to bring them back up, you don't have to bring them up so far. Because you've brought them down so far. You don't have to sell them 100 feet, 1,000 feet. If you brought them down hundreds of feet below surface level, you only have to bring them back to the surface level at best. This is why the New Age community and the spiritual communities are so diverse and complex. This is why the New Age teachers, the New Age entertainers are so intertwined within the entertainment industry, with the education industry. You have Oprah teaming up with Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle. Russell Brand teaming up with Marianne Williamson and all these other people that are out there. Joe Rogan being buddy-buddy with Russell Brand. This is all one big team. These so-called different spiritual modalities are like different vaccines that are out there. Your Johnson & Johnsons are like your Joe Rogans, and your Modernas are like your Russell Brands, all a part of the same system. You have your vaccinated and spiritually unvaccinated communities. These tools that are sold to you in these New Age communities are like your booster shots. Not really required, but it is, it's mandated. But what is that for? It's to maintain that control, maintain that trust, maintain this idea of evolution, forward progress, being extra part of the team, being extra, doing extra credit, being ahead of the class. Oh, I got every booster shot. I not only have one vaccine, I got all 3 vaccines and the booster shots. Like, it's a constant reinforcement of these illusions. And to sell you these programs, all of this is just to set the foundation, like I said before. Once those theories are set, once that trust is set, they can sell you anything. The education system and modern technology, the monkey evolution program itself, is the vaccine to keep you from the sickness of being a caveman, being a savage, outdated human. You buy into the education system. You buy into modern technology, monkey evolution, the Western idea of humanity, the westernized version of this reality, this artificial intelligence, ultimately. You buy into that. Once you become a part of that team, once you become part of that vaccinated group of evolved people, you're no longer a caveman. You're no longer a savage. You're no longer an outdated human. All these things are sold to you. You're not left out anymore. What this also does is that it inherently demonizes the indigenous people, the ones who have a different way of interpreting this reality, outside of the Western version of interpreting this reality. Those are the ones, those are the threat to this new age evolution. The ones that they had to slaughter and genocide. Now they become the superheroes. The ones who were the killers, the ones who stole the land, the ones who killed the indigenous people. They become the superheroes because they are the ones who are pushing the evolution of humanity. And the ones who were just sitting on the land doing nothing with their little spiritual ways, with their little ways of relating to nature and each other, all that old stupid shit, that doesn't matter. That's not going to get you anywhere. You might as well be a caveman if you're going to be talking about medicine wheels and connecting with nature and spirit and all that other stuff. No, the way we interpret this reality is based on science. Industrial age, institutional science. They didn't have universities when the Native Americans was running around. They didn't have universities where the Aboriginal Australians were. So they deserve what they got. They deserve to be taken. They were the ones who were sacrificed so we could move forward with the evolution of humanity. If they hadn't done what they done, we wouldn't be where we are. This is why this system has to be built up so much, so you can inherently believe in those belief systems. When you go along to get along, you're going along with everything, not some of it. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. You're going along with all of it. Worshipping this Western system is going along with the idea that the genocide, that all the crimes that were committed through colonialism, through everything in and around colonialism, the genocide, the murder, the rape, the stealing of the land, the destroying of nature, by going along with the idea of modern so-called civilization, Western society, by going along with that, you're also going along with how they feel about what they've done. They don't care about what they've done. They're happy that they've committed genocide. This is why it's not taught to you in schools. This is why they're trying to erase it from history. They're happy about what they've done. They're proud. They're proud because their belief system tells them if they hadn't done what they've done, they wouldn't be where they are right now. Who gives a fuck where you are? Who cares if the rest of the 99% of the world is impoverished? It doesn't matter. That top 1% is living fat. And that's the evolution of humanity. That's the peak of where we should be. They got so much damn money, they're making you believe that they're going into space on rockets and shit. These billionaires or trillionaires they don't even know what to do anymore. They're just joining in on the bigger illusions. Oh, I'm going to jump in a spaceship and go fly somewhere. By demonizing the indigenous people and their ways of life, their experiential beliefs, and the observation of this reality, by demonizing them, you're demonizing their entire ways of living, their entire ways of experiencing this reality. And when you destroy that, You have to buy into something else. This is why they sold you the idea of science through the institutionalization system they call the education system. Science is the new Christianity. Your God is technology. Your God is artificial intelligence, the metaverse. Back then, they just sold you an invisible God and pushed it with the threat of force through the state, through the monarchy, in demonizing the people that predate Western intelligence. You're separating yourself from ancestral intelligence. This is why, in challenging the heliocentric universe, it's such a threat to the human mind vaccine program. You're threatening human intelligence. Who are you to threaten that? Who are you? You think you're smarter than the world? That's what people take that shit personally, because you're challenging their ego. They automatically think you're in your ego just from thinking differently when you do that. Westernism, or more specifically, Western freedom, this idea of Western freedom, is the vaccine for the disease of older societal modalities. To vest yourself in this Western way of life is to take the vaccine against the outdated modalities of the savages. With the old monarchy, with the old getting away from the kings of England in the United States, it was a way of selling you this mandatory freedom of the Western civilization. The idea of freedom was mandated onto the free world. This idea of freedom was the original mandate of control. Freedom was the original vaccine. And we were mandated into this way of life while the pharmaceutical corporation of Westernality got rich and separated the masses, controlled the masses, impoverished the masses. So when you listen to and you see these so-called spiritual teachers out there, when you hear all of these new age communities, when you watch that system grow, because that's what it is, the implosion of the old ways, the implosion of the old Western ways of life, this artificial takedown of colonialism, just as Black Lives Matter is not really dealing with the depths of what so-called black people have to deal with. Black Lives Matter isn't touching any of that. It's not designed to. It's designed to artificially appear as if it is. The New Age community is basically a Black Lives Matter approach to the spiritual diseases that we are dealing with. And they will sell it to you. They will sell you, just as Black Lives Matter was sold to you, to make more money for the so-called Democratic Party. This new age order, this new age vaccine will be sold to you and mandated to you. And just as the vaccine, if you go against the vaccine, who's going to go against love and light? Who's going to go against health and welfare? You don't care about old people and kids getting sick? How dare you? You don't care about love and light and unity and creating a utopia? How dare you? It's the same shit. And if we don't jump on it beforehand, people will buy these mandates. They will take every vaccine, every spiritual community, new age community, new world order vaccine that's out there, and demonize you for not being a part of it. And they're going to be people that jump in feet first, just as they did with the vaccine. Maybe even the majority of people are going to jump full throttle. But for the people who are on the fence, for the people who are on the edge of interpreting what's going on, who are just questioning, like maybe these so-called spiritual teachers and people that are out there, maybe they are a part of something else. Maybe it is something bigger that's going on out there. Question it.